Would like to lead off today's video by wishing everyone out there a very happy Independence Day, a happy 4th of July here on the north central coast of Florida. It seems like the weather may have abated for a time, and we might actually be able to enjoy some fireworks this evening. Keep your fingers crossed. If you, however, are going to be this evening setting them off yourself and perhaps enjoying an adult beverage at the same time, please let discretion be the better part of valor and be safe. I know we all have liberty. We all have freedom. We all have this ability to enjoy those blessings. But I would like to lead off today's video with a quote that talks about this and how it ties into a completely different story. It's this very familiar quote from Benjamin Franklin. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Now you can see how in certain contexts this could be misconstrued. We, of course, always rein ourselves in at times to do things in a safer way, even though we have liberty to do them in a much more reckless way. But sometimes things like essential liberty can allow for immorality. For example, in a grid-down situation, you haven't been shopping in 2 weeks and your kids are starving. We all know that stealing is wrong. But who would let their kids starve? That's just one example. How sometimes liberty and safety sometimes can be a very murky thing. But what if I told you you were being lied to about America being the last best hope for freedom and liberty? You see, I have to wonder about all of the stories that were floating around medieval Europe during this time. The 1500s, 1600s. People were saying, there's this land. It's a 6-week journey away by sea. And when you get there, there's no kings. There's no queens. There's no duchies. There's no land barons. There's forests as far as the eye can see. Land just for the claiming. Streams full of fish. It's a true paradise. And there are even areas farther south where it's a tropical, paradise. And there's gold, and there's silver, and there's all these things. You have to imagine there were probably some parents telling their children, don't believe fairy tales like that. Can't possibly be. We know the known world. We know everything we need to know about it. Now, many have laughed at this channel talking about Antarctica. Well, guess what? We've caught them in another lie. You see, they had to admit, science did, after a certain amount of time and research, that yes, at one time, Antarctica was forest and grassland and jungle. Now they're saying, of course, it's millions and millions and millions of years ago, and now it's just this wind-blasted hellscape of rock, ice, and snow, and nobody can live there. Not at all. Don't even bother trying to get there. In fact, you're not allowed to. We're going to get together all the governments of the world, and we're going to prohibit anyone from going there unless we authorize it. Now, that should alone set up alarm bells. Because what if the King of England had done the same thing? He would have gone out and told the populace that, all those stories about America, a bunch of fanciful notions, flights of fancy into, make-believe land. It just doesn't exist. See, we're now looking at Antarctica in a way that perhaps those people in medieval Europe looked at the New World based on, quote-unquote, the word of the authority and what they say. But what's the big lie? Well, I've caught him in quite a few, but the one that I've caught him in now is a whopper. It's a huge whopper. I have found 5 different ones on a map, actually, that no one can explain. Here's the first one. You ready for this? This is a penguin. Yep, that's right. This is a penguin. According to modern science, the word used to describe this animal is the same word used to describe penguins. Does this look like a penguin to you? Of course not. It's a little animal that is found, archaeologically speaking, all over China. It's called Psittacosaurus. Now, literally means parrot lizard. Parrot lizard. Now, this is the word used on a map in the 16th century to describe a region in Antarctica. But they said it was penguins they were describing. This is the article. The same word allegedly used to describe penguins on a map in the 16th century also now describes this animal, Psittacosaurus. Meet Psittacosaurus, the dinosaur that keeps on giving, a small species of horned dinosaur. Now, what map am I talking about? We have talked about this map probably in at least 8 or 10 other videos by now. And there are all sorts of things on this map that are amazingly curious, that would make you believe they are entirely wrong about the timeline of Antarctica and when it was habitable and how long it took to freeze. Right down here in the bottom center, this is a Petrus Bertius from the 1600s created this map. There's a term they use, Psittacorum regio. Now, both the words Psittacorum and regio are capitalized. That's key. First of all, regio right here capitalized, they say means, modern science says, means region. When right up here, small r, E-G-N, means region. Regio can also mean in Latin, royal, when it's capitalized. So Psittacorum regio, when they read this, they must have mistook the penguins for parrots. Yep, that's right. They're alleging that the makers of the maps mistook penguins for parrots. Penguins for parrots. They used the same word. Allegedly. Which is what this was all about back here. The same word. Now, there are gray and white parrots, but they don't fly. Penguins don't fly. Penguins don't roost in trees. They don't live in jungles. There's all sorts of things that would be clear evidence that there's no way, if they were talking about penguins, they would have used the term Psittacorum. Now, we have two other things on this map as well. The word beach occurring on a map that is written in Latin in every other place, this being an Old English word. And we also have this word over here, promontorium. See, these both refer to areas that would not have been covered with wind, ice, rock, or snow. This has nothing in common with a parrot or a penguin. But this does. You see, if you were going to use the term Psittacosaurus, meaning parrot lizard, this would be perfect. And I'm sure a lot of people are looking at this and going, hey, that reminds me of something. It sure does. Of a god that is worshipped all over South America. The Mayans, the Aztecs. You see, it shows here, and this is another big lie that modern science puts out, South America directly connected to Antarctica. But this word promontorium refers to a promontory. And this word beach has a very different definition than what we are used to seeing. And here's another map, by the way, that also shows a lizard acting like a parrot, brightly colored, flies, lives in a jungle, chasing away a giant. See, they're wrong about the timing. They're right about it being a jungle and there being places that are habitable. And even recently, a massive heat blast, even BP Earthwatch covered this, hit Antarctica and raise temperatures beyond anything they had ever predicted. But here's the other real key. You see, this in ancient times, in medieval times, this was a beach. This was a strand. This was a beach. This was a strand. Two very different things. And that's what brings us back to here. Down here, when they say beach, provincia, first of all, that the word beach occurs is incredibly strange. But provincial beach would mean an area of rocks where you could land a ship. That's what that word means. That shouldn't have been the case in 1600. They should have just been seeing giant floes of ice everywhere, and snow, and rocks, not beaches. And that other word, promontory, a narrow area of high land that rises in the sea. A narrow area of high land that rises in the sea. Described right here. Promontorium, terra australis, southern promontory land. Here is land described. Here is an area where flying birds are described. Here is an area where there is a beach described. Here is an area up here where they show Antarctica being connected to South America. How many more lies? And you can look up the word beach from Old English actually referred to the pebbles themselves, the rocks themselves. Sorry, I should have zoomed this in. In Latin, which the entire map was written in, beach is the word litore. So this should have said litore provincia, not beach. This entire map was created by those who spoke languages rooted in Latin, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese. And I'll give you this link too from, you can look up promontory. It's a very common term. But, you see, there's another layer to this. It's why they're lying. Some people would say, Florida Maquis, okay, we buy the idea that they're lying, but why are they lying to us about Antarctica? This is why. This is the HMS Victory. This was a ship of the line during the mid-18th century, 1750, I believe it was built. Even with ships like this, it took them 6 weeks to get from the United Kingdom, Ireland, France, Europe, to the colonies. This was the key. You see, there was no way Great Britain could project its power this far when it took them 6 weeks, even with the top-of-the-line ships that they had, to get here. Even if you had an intelligence report that came back to England, 6-week trip, and you could turn around the next day and send a ship full of sailors with that intelligence, it'd be a 3-month turnaround. The intelligence was useless. So all of the generals, all of the higher-ups, they had no way of fighting this war in any real way. The best maps at the time were held by those living here. Imagine finding a place where you would have no military intelligence and you had no maps. How in the world could you win? You see, that's the exact same story for Antarctica now. That's why governments are so terrified of people coming down here, because they could never project their authority here. That's why it's so important that I did this video on the 4th of July. The reason we are free, the reason we have liberty, the reason we were able to push away from the kings of Europe and the royalty of Europe was because they literally couldn't physically get here to enforce their will. They tried. They tried for years and years. They sent ship after ship after ship after ship after ship. And it didn't work. And when they got here, they weren't fighting in straight lines like they did in Europe. They were fighting in the middle of a place of woods. They had no idea over the next hill what they were going to find. Would it be a river? Would it be a swamp? But the people who had been living here did. You see, this is something that many people have a hard time grasping because so much of history has been lost. If I had talked to folks about, say, for example, the issues between the Escate and the Fergana, they would look at me like, oh, is this some more of your sci-fi nonsense, Mucky? All those sci-fi shows, it's really getting to your head. Well, these places existed. Arachosia, Aria, Tapuria. It's just been lost to history. Even with ships like this at the time, which were incredible feats of engineering. 3 levels of staterooms, 104 guns. The best sails that could be created, the best types of navigation, they stood no chance. Why? It was too far away. And of course, there was also the help of the French, too. We can't forget, that. That's where the Statue of Liberty comes from, which kind of brings us back to here. See, when we talk about essential liberty, we cannot really divorce that from people doing what they will. Because that's what liberty is it not? People being able to do their own will. And that, if we're going to fight for it, and we're going to value it, and we're going to lift it up, people are going to do things we don't agree with, and that we believe to be immoral and perhaps, maybe in some cases, evil. But as we know, that is subjective, isn't it? Because you would do anything to survive, to live, to protect your family. And that's why some decided to believe the fanciful stories back in the 16th and 17th century. Believe the words of dreamers. See, they didn't even have in most little towns and areas, didn't even have a town crier. They would have to go to a major city or castle like this and talk with people and exchange stories to even know about it. Most didn't. That's why it took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And it was only when the king decided to take notice and declare war on the colonies that people in Europe began to say, hey, wait a minute, this is real? This is really that big of a threat? I thought it was just a make-believe story. The kings of pretty much all of Europe had the exact same problem. We know, of course, of the King of England and his problems. But that's what this is really all about. In Antarctica, they're lying, and it may be the last best place for independence. And I'll leave it there. God bless everyone. Please, once again, be safe tonight. Be careful. We want to have you with us tomorrow. There was a guy here in Florida that just blew his hand off being, Florida man, I guess is the best way to describe it. So I will leave it there. But you just have to sometimes look at some of the most mundane things to see the truth. And I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.